Hi all, welcome to our session. Hope you're having a great week. And today we're gonna discuss about how to create a blockchain on business. How to create a business on blockchain. So this is Rohit. He'll be helping us with the question and answers whatever we have today. Over to you, Rohit.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Saturday. So the topic for today is how do you really get started with a business on blockchain, and primarily this will cater to all kinds of entrepreneurs, developers, designers, even bureaucrats, common people who are looking to delve into blockchain, and really create a sustainable model around it. And so the question that most people have is that, how do you really get started with the sustainability part of it, and how do you sustain it for the long term? So that's what we'll be tackling today. So yeah, happy to hear your questions. Yeah.
So my first question here is, what kind of business models can be thought on top of blockchain?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, blockchain has evolved a lot since inception, and this is pretty in line with its comparison with the internet, right? So when internet came around earlier, um, early models were very simple, right? So the early models were like, okay, let's launch just a simple bookstore, online, like when Amazon started, or let's create a browser, on internet, and so on and so forth. However, they did not have real economic value, right? There was no way to monetize, and what that leads to is that led to I would say like very frivolous, or maybe a very simple activity happening on the internet. People were just coming in, browsing, and that's it. Right? There was no real transactions happening. And this is similar to what blockchain is experiencing right now on the customer front. The enterprise story is very different. Right? So I'll tackle the customer front first, right, and then I'll come to the enterprise one. So on the customer front, people have not yet cracked, a good business model, right? People are trying to understand how customers can actually use, crypto, and more importantly, if it can really solve a big problem for the consumer, right? So that has not yet happened, right? And there are multiple reasons for that, right? Which I think we discussed in the last one, right? That is scalability, speed, the cost per transaction, and those kinds of things, which are yet to be tackled. So customer models will take a lot of time. My estimate would be at least minimum of 5 years. Yeah, probably more. So that's for the customer side. On the business side, there are a lot of business models, and that's where the real exciting and impactful work is happening. And reason being that as we discussed, the issues of scalability and the cost per transaction are hard to bear or take into account for the customer, but enterprises can work around it, right? Because enterprises have big R&D budgets, right? They have investments lined up for specific projects, right? They want to implement, and that is why you notice mostly blockchain being used at an enterprise level right now, right? So in enterprise, if I were to name a few business models here, one would be just simply your decentralized KYC, right? This is something that a lot of people are trying to crack, and if you can build a very successful decentralized KYC platform that safeguards your identity, right? Completes your KYC with the requisite paperwork and minimal physical work, more of digital work, right? And at the same time, keeps your documents secure, right? Which is the main concern right now people have when they're doing KYC with banks. Right? So if we can solve that, and then you can sell it out to banks, NBFCs, or financial entities, right? That's like a big win, right? That's one. Another quick example here would be import-export, right? Trade finance. Sorry, trade finance. So in trade finance, what happens is with classic issues again, right? You always have multiple entities interacting in any import-export transaction, right? And all these parties don't trust each other, right? Because they have to do the same manual paperwork again and again, and there are actually a lot of frauds happening even right now as we speak in the traditional trade finance world. So digitizing that's step one, right? And then step two is really enabling all the documents process storage on blockchain. And in effect, if you can add the smart contract to execute the logic itself, right, which is the last leg of the transaction, then there's no end to the level of automation and the level of improvement that you can have, right, on blockchain. So that's one of the very successful business model that a lot of companies actually doing that.
And talking about the enterprise, what are the services, existing services available for enterprise?
Sure. So existing services for enterprise, I mean, if you notice, there are two kinds of blockchains that have come around in the picture. One is a very well end-to-end fully managed blockchain, like something like an IBM or an AWS is on it, right? So if you notice, like these big companies, they have uh, used the blockchain to run a managed version of it. Right? When I say managed, what it means is that they will maintain the nodes for you, they will install the nodes for you, right? And they will take the backups and everything to make sure that the blockchain follows the regular protocol, so that you don't need to do the hard work. That's what managed blockchain is. So that's very good for enterprises right now, right? Um, that's what, like these two services I would say are the best in the market. That's out of our experience. But then when it comes to SMEs or say customers, there is no good, solution yet. People are trying to do it, right? A lot of people who are thinking, okay, how can we really create a simple plug and play UI based model, right, for SMEs or these small shop owners and everything, so that they can also adopt blockchain. Right? Obviously, the pain point there is less right now, but it will eventually grow as they realize that okay, other companies are using it, right, and they have to use it ultimately. One because peer pressure, second because regulatory concerns. So yes, that is something which is missing. Right? That is something yet to be invented.
And what is the technology stack they can use?
So technology stacks are multiple. It depends primarily on this particular entrepreneurs or startups core focus or long-term focus. So let's take a quick example. So let us say somebody wants to start, the business of KYC, as we discussed, the first example, right? Now, decentralized KYC on blockchain ideally has to be in a private network, right? And the reason for that is pretty simple, because you really don't want your KYC or your ID to be public, right? Documents to be public. Just like you have your Aadhaar number, right, or PAN number. So you want to share it, but you want to share it with a limited network. Right? So you want to share it with your CAs, lawyers, bank officials, etc. Right? So given that that has to be a private network, so a private chain is definitely the way to go, right? But within the private chain, like the question then comes is, okay, how do you really incentivize the players to adopt that chain? Right? How do you make sure that everybody comes on the same chain? Right? And that is where a business model through incentives, number one, or number two is the regulatory push. Now, regulatory push will take some time to happen because, as we discussed again in the last webinar, that governments are always the last one, right? So they will probably come in, 10 years, 15 years after people have already started it, right? So now that's a big challenge. So that means number two is still out. So number one is the way to move forward. So the idea here would be that can you really build an economic incentive and a business model around the KYC platform? Now, speaking of the technology stack specifically, so if you're using a private chain in this particular example, something like a Hyperledger or a Neo would suit very well. Both of them are permission chains, right? And they have their own pros and cons. So, for example, if I speak briefly about Hyperledger, Hyperledger is an open source project launched by IBM. I mean, supported by IBM officially. And so, since it has the backing of IBM, it actually gets a good adoption and a good brand value as well, right? In comparison, Neo is catching up very fast, right? However, Neo does not have a backing of like a company like IBM. There are some companies in China that are backing it, but yes, there's no like major entity, major cloud corporation backing it up. However, that being said, that does not mean that the platform is bad. Obviously, Neo has its own pros. So, at a tech spec by spec comparison, both of them will land pretty well in terms of the regular use case. So, either of these would be a good technology stack to use. Yeah.
What are the various stand in the market?
Various standards. Sure. So, when it comes to standards, we'll have to be again deep dive into the types of chains that we use. So either it's a private chain or public chain. So if we are specifically talking about a public chain, right? In this case, let's take the case of Ethereum. Right? Now, Ethereum is actually being used by a lot of companies who are trying to rate tokens and cryptocurrencies, and also companies who are trying to create their own tokens for a very specific purpose, right? So let's take the second example that we discussed, the trade finance, right? Now, in trade finance, the way to incentivize a transaction is that either you reduce the duty or the taxes on the transaction, right? So, say for example, in a traditional import-export, I incur 20%. as a tax, right? Now in digital, if you can reduce it by 10%, and then the rest 10% gets incentivized and gets replaced by a digital tool, right? So then that is a good enough incentive for a person to switch away from traditional to this one, right? Because not only is he reducing his cost, he's also getting a digital incentive, right? So there, then the question comes: okay, can we create a standard around this process, right? And can we launch it so that all the companies can adopt it? So yes, there is a standard there. It's called the Origin Trace Alliance Group. Yeah, and it's a very major, famous group. In fact, we are a member of it, both venue as a company. So what that gives us as a company is we get access to all the members, all the corporations who are participants on that. That means we also get a say in terms of how the nodes should be set up, how the process should be, right? And more importantly, how the incentives should be structured for the companies in the long term. So it's a very powerful group. And at the same time, it's a very decentralized group in the sense that there's no single entity that controls it. It's kind of like a democracy. That's a good way to describe it. Right? Pretty much like how the blockchain functions. Right? So yes, this standard is pretty powerful. I think people who are looking to explore standards on trade finance, this will be a great one to explore. Then I think another great standard to highlight here would be on certifications, education certifications. So that is something that actually has been in the pipeline for long. Nobody has solved it yet. However, the way it's taking shape is that, let us say you want to verify a candidate, right? And you want to verify his credentials from inception to the current point, right? So from the point he entered school to the point he graduated to the point, current point of his working. Now, right now, the way that happens is that these companies, they go out and they find third-party verifiers, right? Yeah. So then they pay them money to do some investigation, so to say, right? And dig up dirt and all that stuff, right? So you need to find out manually, okay, that whether that person is good and whether what he's saying is true or not, right? So I think we discussed this a couple of webinars back, is that if you notice the whole process here, right, of verifying, entering the identity, entering the credentials, right? All of that, right, technically is just a simple work approach and can easily be replaced by a decentralized system, right? So you don't really need, right, one central authority to maintain records, right? You can technically just decentralize it, right? And any node in the process, right, of the chain can technically verify it. So what's happening here is that now the standard that needs to be created is that, okay, can we standardize a decentralized CD or a decentralized ledger, right, for verifications, right? Credential verification specifically, right? And that means credential verification not just of students, it could be of companies, right? It could be of your offices as well, right? I want to see whether an office space is good or not, who has been the previous owner, or even a house, right? So basically, whenever an entity needs to be verified for the credentials,
Resumes for the past experience.
yeah, absolutely, everything. So technically, as simple as something of a scholarship, right, or that you mentioned on your CV, whether that's true or not, right? We don't know. Right? So we are trusting, person, right? So that whole trust equation between the humans can be replaced. So the way the standard is evolving there, and as I said, it's still in the pipeline. Nobody has created it yet, but it will happen soon.
There won't be any chance to manipulate.
There won't be any chance to manipulate, absolutely. Yeah, because it's all classic decentralization on the blockchain protocol. So the way it will happen is that on your CV certificate, you can actually append a QR, right? And that QR will contain this complete information in a digital format. At the same time, this information will be decentralized across all the parties. That means all your employers, all your scholarship providers, all your universities will have a copy of that data. Right? So now, if you try to manipulate something, then obviously the others will refuse, right? So that's a new standard that is coming in. And that will be pretty powerful.
And talking about consumers, what are the blockchain features consumers can use?
So as we discussed, consumers are still at the far end of the funnel, right? And we have not yet reached that particular yet, right? So maybe in 5-6 years we will be there at that level, right? But if I were to give an example right now, I think the killer applications that consumers can use, right? One would be to really try out all the decentralized social media or the decentralized content platforms. For example, one of them is called Steemit, Yeah, SGEEIT.
Mm.
So what it does is, I mean, for I think a lot of people, actually in our comments last time, they had mentioned they already are using it. So what Steemit does is, it's kind of like a content contribution platform where you can put in all your social media posts, blog posts, or anything. And if you find some content valuable, right, you can upload it. And then what happens is you get a decent, basically a token in return for it. Right? Now, what that token does is that token can actually be exchanged in terms of fiat, right? So you get like say $1 worth of coins if you upload 3-4 answers, for example, right? And obviously you have if you find those answers valuable, right? And you get much more if you contribute. So the engineering and the incentives are structured very nicely, right? So you have to contribute. You have to be an active contributor to really earn something meaningful. At the same time, you get more if people upvote. So that means that you have to upvote, you have to upload meaningful content, right? You cannot just upload any random content, right? So that way it's pretty nicely structured, and the rewards are pretty powerful. And that catching force actually, people are using it a lot in US. I think in India it's still not very prevalent, but it might come. So that's one, I think, brilliant use case for the consumer right now, where they can experience how like a democratic, decentralized chain of participants, right, are really coming together on a content contribution platform and incentivizing and getting incentives in return as well, right? So there are very few social media platforms that are doing this right now. Steemit is one. There is one more that's Massive. Right? Yeah, that's actually an Indian product and started by one of our batchmates. So that is another very interesting example. Then there's one more, which is different from all social media and content profiles. It's primarily around the banking system. Right? So right now, to give you the main point here, what happens is that when you enter a banking transaction, say you want to send money from one point to another point, right? You have to obviously go to a bank, right? You have to either use your digital banking app or your UPI app or something, right? However, what happens is that ultimately your transaction still needs to flow through a central system, right? So the bank will ultimately collate all the NEFTs at the end of the day, or if it's IMPS, it has to go through the IMPS switch, right? That receive reach the receiver, right? However, all these involve that centralized identity. So the question then comes is, okay, then can I really do a decentralized peer-to-peer gaming, right, without using the bank, right? So obviously, cryptocurrencies are one way, right, and they are already there for a long time. A lot of cryptocurrencies out there, but there's something new, right, which has just been launched in India. So I won't take the name here, but I'll leave it as a mystery to the participants. Let them figure it out, right, and probably we'll bring it up in the next webinar. So, yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm done with my questions now. Let's look into users' questions.
Sure. Okay, till time these guys type out their questions here. I'll read out the last questions I think we had missed out last time. We had a few. So one of them was when blockchain really takes off. I'll just pull it up as well. Yeah, when blockchain really takes off, how will the governments adopt it? How will the governments react to it? Say, obviously, right now it's very frothy, right? And that was the question. This was a long question that they had posed right on the webinar last time, and we didn't get enough time to answer it. But so the primary concern that people had was, okay, right now the governments are very frothy, right? People are really going haywire left and right. Some governments are outrightly banning it, not blockchain, cryptocurrencies, right? So blockchain as a tech is very strong, so that's not a problem. But yes, cryptocurrencies are still a very frothy market, right? And they will continue to be a frothy market. And the reason for that is, it takes a natural time correction for any such new entry. Right? So if you take the case of capital markets as well, right, when new currencies get introduced in a capital market, right, or say a completely new system comes in, right, the market takes time to correct itself, right? Initially, trading will be frothy because people will have different hypotheses. The people who are backing that currency or backing that system will always have more powerful views, right, than the people who are just passive participants. And then the governments try to be neutral initially, but then they ultimately have to take a side without the risk of a revolution, right? So they really have to be very diplomatic, and it's a hard work, right? I mean, I never want to be in the shoes of a government bureaucrats, right? Because then you have to be like really diplomatic and make sure that people are not really angry with what you choose. It's very hard, right? Managing a billion people like India. So it's natural for them to play safe, right? Because they don't really want people to lose money, right? So that will always be the premise, number one premise of any government, any central regulator. Even if you take RBI, RBI has bailed out all banks in the history of India. All banks in the sense that whenever a bank has suffered a loss or an NPA, right, or a loan that has gone defaulted, right, RBI has bailed them out. Right? Because for them, I mean, ultimately, what they want is they don't want the customer to lose, that safety net of the banking system, right? And they don't want the customer to lose trust, right? So that's the premise. That's the premise number one. So it will continue to happen. They will continue to be fraudy. But yes, if I speak of the future, 5 years, 10 years, the governments that I see really adopting crypto or any form of tokens on blockchain will be the ones that have had classic trust issues in the past, like where the participants, that means the citizens, they have had very less trust on the government. That is where the adoption will be the fastest, right? For example, China, right? Russia, Argentina, Venezuela, right? So these are the governments that have been very fraudulent, and people have not trusted the government, right? People have been wary of the government. People have accepted to some extent what the government has pushed down their throat, but they're not really trusted, so to say. Right? In India, it's, I would say, a divided sentiment, right? Some people trust, the leader, right? Some don't at all, right? It's a mix, right? But I would, I will not be wrong if I say that majority of the people in India trust, right, what government is doing. Trust in the sense, I mean, they are at least along with the government. They want to see what they want to bring to the table, right? So they're patient and they listen. So that is why India will take time, right? But yes, if that trust issue comes in quickly, then adoption will also happen much quickly. But this is just for cryptocurrencies. Blockchain in itself will not be hindered by the government. So the way blockchain will happen is that blockchain will get adopted, under the radar in almost all the enterprise sectors. Pretty much like we discussed in the last webinar, it's applicable across sectors. Across sectors, I mean more than 60-70%. It will not be 100%. That is completely acceptable, which is fine. Right? Because just like internet is not applicable in some sectors, it's fine. But yes, eventually it has hit 90% of them, as we have seen. So same way blockchain will happen over time. And at the end of the day, then 5 years, 10 years down, governments will have no choice but to live with it and accept it. Yeah. So this was one thing I think that had come in last time. Another question that had come in, which we had listed out the last webinar, was specifically around the Indian stance, right? And that too, how does it affect the neighboring relations of the countries? So, for example, if you notice, if India, like the way it has done right now, bans cryptocurrencies, like to trading from fiat, right? Also, it's important to note, I think some people don't know that only the fiat to crypto has been banned. Crypto to crypto has not been banned. Okay. So you can still go from Bitcoin to Ethereum, provided you have Bitcoin, right, or vice versa. But you cannot go from INR to Bitcoin right now. Now, eventually, if government continues to stay this way, right, and which looks likely for at least maybe 6 months, something like that, until this RBI releases their paper, which they have been planning for some time. But if the government stays this way, that is, continue to take a stance of banning fiat conversion, then what will happen is just like the exchanges that have fled the country, same ways all the capital that flows into cryptocurrencies right now or used to flow, right, will flee overseas, right? So, for example, if I want to invest in cryptocurrencies, right, and if I want to use my piece to invest in it, right, what I will do is, okay, India is not allowing, that's fine, I'll just convert it to USD from an exchange. You open a US banking account, right, through a third party channel or a Singapore account or whatever, whichever is the easiest, right, and then trade from them. Right? So why will I wait for, say, 10 months, 12 months for the government to realize its mistake? Till that time, Bitcoin would have reached a new high. Right? So I would rather, spend a few dollars, get a foreign banking account, right, and trade from there to get the exponential ROI that we are getting from, right, rather than wait for it. Government to get that. So that is something which I feel that's the way Indian relations will happen with all countries around. And yeah, and it's not surprising that's the way it will if they really take a hard stance. Cool. yeah, guys, if you have any questions, you can feel free to share it out in the chat. So those of you who are on the Zoom app, you will see a chat option. I think on the browser also it's there at the bottom right. So any questions, please feel to type. Yeah. Meanwhile, we'll continue the conversation till the time question comes in. What has been your experience from your friends? I'm sure some of your friends have also been excited about crypto and
Nobody has the knowledge about blockchain.
Okay.
If I tell them blockchain,
Yeah.
they ask me what is blockchain. That's
Uh-huh.
when I started explaining them what blockchain is. It is related to digital assets, digital currency.
Yeah.
So nobody has knowledge about it.
But do you see that they are curious?
Yes, they of course they are. That's what once it starts spreading over everywhere, and everyone are curious to know about it, interested in it since it's into digital assets, digital currency, and all. So even my mom was asking me what is blockchain, and so I explained more. So everybody started explaining.
Right. Interesting. Cool. And but what have been as per what are the conversations you have had? What did you notice was the most common question that they asked? The most basic common question.
They say cryptocurrency and all is banned in India. Bitcoin is banned in India. So how it gonna help?
Okay, so it's mostly
does it make sense?
Okay.
In India,
right. So it's mostly the myth that is happening, right? And all that, which we discussed.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
That's what I'm explaining.
All right. All right, guys. I think that should be it. I don't think there is any question right now. Yeah. Previous ones we all done.
You guys can add in the comments, so we will discuss them in the next webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the Facebook event, even the Zoom chat, or you can just email us directly, right, on the email ID. There it is. admin@venue.in. Yeah. And look forward to you in the next one.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.